There are 166 tracks in the Mario Kart series. Of those 166 tracks, 96 of them are in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. That means there are more tracks in this game than not. Of the 70 tracks that didn't make the cut, which ones were the biggest snubs, which ones would benefit the most from a remake, and which ones deserve to be forgotten to time? All this and more in today's episode of Super Mario Kart Sucks. Yeah, I'm not even gonna lie, most of the bottom of this list is just full of SNES and GBA tracks. The 2D sprite version of Mario Kart just does not age well today. However, I do think it's interesting to look back at these tracks and see which track layouts lend themselves better to remakes. Choco Island 1 is not one of those. This track is a glorified circle with not one fun shortcut, and might just be the most ugly track in the series. I hate its TV static look on the SNES, and hate its negative personality look in Tour. I do like its sunset background in Super Circuit, but it's literally just ripped from Sunset Wilds, so I can't even give it credit there. It's ugly, it's boring, and it doesn't need to be remade. It can live here at the bottom of this list. Similar story here with Ghost Valley 1. I do really like the Ghost Valley vibe, but this track is just the definition of boring. I could see a major overhaul making this track better, but up until this point, they really haven't done that with an SNES track. If it gets the Cheeseland treatment, we could be in for a surprise, but until then, this track can stay here at the bottom. Ghost Valley 2 is much of the same story. It's got a decent layout with a pretty cool shortcut about halfway into the track, but unfortunately it falls victim to the same song and dance many of these early tracks have. Just too simple. There's nothing that makes it stand out, and the fact that there are 4 other tracks on this list that are nearly identical to it don't help. Okay, I get why they remade this one. The big mud pit section is pretty unique for an SNES track. However, besides that, it's just a big ugly circle. Like, seriously, look at this track on the DS. Ooh, another circle, but this time you turn right. The Koopa Beach tracks are some of the better looking courses in Super Mario Kart, but the layout here is just pitiful. Driving in the water near lily pads and Cheep Cheeps is neat, but that's about all this course has going for it. Pretty underwhelming. Other than being a flashbang of white, Vanilla Lake 1 is pretty decent for a Super Mario Kart circle track. It's got good challenge, and I think it would translate well to a modern Mario Kart game. But here on the SNES, it's not doing much for me. If you take a look at this track, you'd think it's a super technical course that requires a lot of skill, and you just turn left. At least the water section is longer here, but still, the track is just such an anomaly. What is even the point of this section here? You can't even go in there. Okay, I'm really not trying to hate on the tropical beach courses, but come on. I like the aesthetic you're going for, but seriously, more left turns? At least this one is somewhat unique with it being set on an archipelago. Driving on many different islands is cool, but again, it's just a very forgettable track. Some may say this is sacrilegious, but the first ever Bowser's Castle track is nothing special. I appreciate it for what it is, but I'm just not a huge fan of this layout. The jumps add nothing, and the zigzag pattern just isn't that fun. Let the bloodbath begin. The first 3D track on this list is Luigi's Raceway from Mario Kart 64. This is just the original Toad circuit. Sure, it's the first track in the game and supposed to act as an introduction to the player, but it's just devoid of any personality. And that's hard to do with the track based on Mr. Personality himself. There's no cool shortcuts, no cool changes in terrain, and it just has the same boring loop with 2 left turns. Truly the special K of Mario Kart tracks. Bowser's Castle 2 is super interesting. There are many interesting cuts you can take, which isn't too uncommon for these better SNES tracks. But also the route here is pretty fun and engaging. It doesn't make me want to gouge my eyes out, which is pretty decent for the game it comes from. Ugh, this track sucks. The music is so annoying, the Monty Moles suck, and the track is once again just a stupid oval. I get it, most loops are ovals, but be creative at least in the slightest. It's not fun to look at, it's not fun to drive on, and is completely overshadowed by its much better counterpart, Moo Moo Meadows on the Wii. Moo Moo Farm doesn't need to ever come back. I actually really like Cheep Cheep Island. It's got an interesting layout with the indent in the middle, many different branching paths, and really great music. It came back for Mario Kart Tour, which is great, but in all honesty, we have plenty of these beach-themed tracks. It's definitely one of the better of these early ones, but I'm not sure it needs to make a return. Okay, this Super Circuit track actually rocks. Broken Pier does a great job of having many different shortcuts to take, and also has a super unique layout. The shortcuts here are pretty unique because you're jumping over the corners of the pier trying to get just the smallage edge on your fellow racers. The risk is high and the reward isn't even that high, but when you need those extra few seconds, they're there. I personally can't put it much higher because I think the flat courses have been pretty drawn out, but if it were to be remade in the future with elevation changes like Sky Garden, I could see this becoming a fan favorite. I have very similar views on Ghost Valley 3. Ghost Valley 3 does a great job on difficulty with all the holes in the deck. Learning to jump over them is tricky, but I think it adds great challenge to this course. I'm not quite sure why all Ghost themed tracks through the first 3 games are based on boardwalks and piers, but it seemed to work. This is a pretty solid course. The one that started it all. This is actually a really solid first track. It's got a great shape that allows for many different mushroom cuts and some banging music. It does inherently have pretty boring visuals, but it's the first track ever. You've got to give them some slack. For a Bowser's Castle track, this one is pretty simple. Just a couple jumps and a few thwomps, but it's fun nonetheless, so it gets some points there. Absolutely love the layout of Donut Plains 2. I would say this is a lock for a remake, but we literally just got Donut Plains 3, and this is just the less interesting version of that, but definitely a great track. This is the only track from Mario Kart 64 to never be remade, and for good reason. It sucks. It's so damn long. I guess you could give it that N64 Rainbow Road treatment and make it one long lap, but even at that point, I still think this track is pretty boring. The jumps may be fun now that you can trick off them, but for Mario Kart 64, it's a no for me, dog. Luigi Circuit for the GBA is a really great track that shows that setting a tone is just as important as track design. You'd be remiss to just put this track off as another Mario Circuit clone, because wait for it, this track has rain. Yeah, it's crazy to say it, but that does add just enough atmosphere to make it stand out from the rest. Frappe Snowland has such a solid layout. Lots of great places for mushroom cuts, great dusk snowy atmosphere, and solid music. I'm just not sure how the course competes with later tracks. It might just be too simple to compete. Okay, this is just a loop, but it's creative. It's a loop around a cracking frozen lake. Lots of snow blocking the way and ice blocks to jump over. There was just a Tour remake, and I think it was pretty solid. I wouldn't be opposed to a Vanilla Lake 2 return. This is a long SNES track, but that isn't saying much. Mario Circuit 4 is actually a really solid track that makes use of as much track space as possible to make a course. The track here can get pretty skinny towards the end, so the difficulty is higher than other Mario circuits. Peach's Circuit from Super Circuit is one of those decently good tracks that is just too generic for its own good. It's got a great layout, great music, but was just bound to be forgotten over time. Except that's where you'd be wrong. Surprisingly, Peach's Circuit was brought back twice, once on the DS and once again in Mario Kart Tour. DS was a fairly faithful remake, while Tour spiced it up with some elevation changes. Not one I'm clamoring for a return, but obviously not offended by it in any way. For a Super Circuit track, this is a long one, but in the best way possible. Lots of open corners for shortcuts and nice theming, if a little overdone. But this was one of the first desert tracks, so I can't dock it too many points there. The Tour remake was pretty faithful with a few extra water features, which I think adds a nice Oasis aesthetic. Not a standout, but not a terrible track. I'm a big fan of these classic Bowser's Castle tracks. Something about the simple track right over the lava just does it for me. The jumps over the metal grates are something I'm a big fan of here. I do wish some of them would lower in and burn you, as you never truly feel in danger on this track, but fun nonetheless. So here's the thing. I'm a big fan of this track as a race option. I think it has a fun, engaging layout with plenty of route changes and risk versus reward shortcut options. However, theming wise, it is so boring. Is this seriously the best they could do with the Koopa Troopa Beach concept? Don't get me wrong, I do love the Koopa shaped rock. I think that's probably the best feature on this track, but besides that, the beach feels dead. No one is vacationing, no spectators, just these stupid crabs. But it is a pretty fun track, so that goes a long way. Remember Bowser's Castle 2 I just ranked 2 spots lower? Well, if we could make that track 1,000 times cooler with more sharp turns and more jumps, that would be Bowser's Castle 4. Truly a shame that this track wasn't brought back over Bowser's Castle 2, because this one would have crushed with a remake. And this is why it was never brought back. Bowser's Castle 3 is the best Super Circuit Bowser's Castle, narrowly. I truly went back and forth over which one was better, but I think 3, while considerably easier, just has a better flow to it. While 4 is more convoluted, 3 feels more focused and has 3 distinct sections: the thwomps, the jumps, and the fireballs. The jumps specifically are so fun in the Wii version of this track, and I just gotta give it the edge over Bowser Castle 4. Donut Plains 1 is honestly just an inferior version of Donut Plains 2. It's a good track, but I'm glad they remade the second one. There's a great shortcut about a third into this track, but yet again, it's just a pretty simple theme that gets lost amongst the many grassy tracks we've had over the years. I'm a big fan of Sherbetland. I think the layout of this track is sick, taking you inside the ice cave and interweaving the massive icicle. The shiny reflective ice track is beautiful, and the music here is pretty good too. However, these penguins are so annoying. Their whining is insufferable. Our first Rainbow Road is on this list, and it should come as no surprise to y'all that it's from Super Circuit. This track is actually pretty sick. It has so many tight corners that you have to jump over, making skill a massive part of the equation. However, I don't think it would bode well in a remake, due to the simple fact that jump shortcuts don't really exist anymore in the game. It's a fun track, but with the amount of Rainbow Roads there are today, I think its legacy has unfortunately been overshadowed. Then finally, our last SNES track on this list is Mario Circuit 2. I'm not even gonna lie, a lot of this track's best attributes come from its remake in Mario Kart 7. There's so much off-road here that is a mushroom cut paradise. And don't forget, the glider ramp at the end allows you to ride the railing and cut the final turn short. It's easy to put this track off as too simple or boring, but that doesn't take into account just how fun it is. It might just be the most fun track to time trial because of that very fact. Easy when you want it to be easy, but has enough challenge to keep you coming back. It really is such a great track. Going from the last SNES track to our first Double Dash track, Luigi Circuit is hands down one of the most unique starting tracks in the series' history. The track is shaped with 2 loops on each end, and a single road connecting the 2. That means as you're driving, you may be passing other racers who might be going in other directions, giving you the player the opportunity to either expand your lead or attack the leader. Truly ahead of its time, considering how the Tour City tracks would operate in the future. However, the theme is just a little too bland to give it a higher ranking, but not a bad track in the slightest. I really went back and forth deciding which Luigi Circuit was better between Double Dash and Wii. Double Dash might have been a tad more creative, but I think Wii's is just more fun. There's more off-road here, and the banked boosted finish is always so fun. I also think the stadium right near the finish line gives it a more excited energy. Definitely one of the best tracks in the scary ghost boardwalk genre, which is crazy that it's even a genre, but it is. Truly, it just comes down to this one having elevation change. The change of pace plays a massive role in making the track engaging throughout the whole way. The indoor section, while short, is chaotic and fun, and I love the pitch black sky. It really helps set the tone for what it's trying to go for. Double Dash's Mario Circuit is a great track that makes sure to engage you around every turn. Whether it's the giant patch of off-road guarded by the chain chomp, the tunnel separating the road track and the dirt track, or the bumpy road that is flush with Goombas. Every section of this track is testing you at all times, especially in the Wii remake of this track. Tricking off the bumps or even the bridge at the very end could be the very thing that separates you from first place. But once again, I'm inclined to go with Mario Kart Wii's rendition of Mario Circuit. I absolutely adore the look of this track. For the first time in a Mario game, you get to see what Mushroom Kingdom looks like, not just Peach's castle, but also the village that I assume the Toads live in. The figure 8 layout works great and allows for some awesome shortcuts. It's also got some of my favorite music in the series. Speaking of figure 8s, figure 8 Circuit for the DS. While this track doesn't have a killer shortcut like Mario Circuit, I've got to give it props for the massive stadium along the front side of the course. This course is a drifter's paradise, and I personally just think this track gives off the perfect kart racing aesthetic. Okay, I know I wasn't a big fan of the oval tracks they brought up earlier, but Yoshi Falls is the exception to this. I love the risk versus reward decision to take the safe high road with the ramp, or risk it all taking a tighter line through the waterfall. Once you are decently good at the game, it isn't that big of a risk, but for someone who hasn't played DS in years, I found myself falling quite a bit, and I'm not mad. That's great course design. I'm not usually a big fan of desert tracks, but Desert Hills caught me by surprise. The track truly lives up to its name, as it's got both desert and hills. Jokes aside, it's an insanely fun track with so many mushroom cuts through corners and really fun, goofy music. I'm not quite sure what these pipes have to do with the theming, but it gives it a bit of spice that I kind of like. Mushroom Bridge is one of my favorite tracks to use the busy city traffic concept. Weaving around other cars while racing is super fun, and I also think this track does an incredible job at shortcuts. Mario Kart Double Dash's Bowser's Castle might just be the most frightening of them all. It opens up with you entering his castle through a giant menacing marble sculpture of his head and arms. The thwomps add to the danger right out the gate, having to navigate around them. And then another Bowser head shoots fireballs at you on two different sides of the track. You never truly feel safe the entire race, and it takes the Bowser's Castle concept to the extreme. Now this is how you do a spooky track. Luigi's Mansion is an incredible track with a theme that nails what it's going for, while also giving us perhaps some of the best gimmicks and shortcuts. The walking trees are spooky and great obstacles. The muddy ground on the back half of the track makes you work hard to find the best path possible without slowing down. It's also the first track to be based on another game, which is also pretty neat. Finally, our first and only tour track on this list. Piranha Plant Pipeline. The story around this track is quite interesting. It came out right around the time of the Booster Course Pass, and as we saw throughout the release of the pass, that was usually a pretty surefire way to make it into the game. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like this made the cut for one reason or another. It's probably because of the plethora of other Piranha Plant themed tracks in 8 Deluxe already. However, was it any good? I don't know. I never played it. I can't, since Tour rotates tracks every 2 weeks. From the videos I saw, it looked pretty fun, but I can't really give it a great honest rating for that reason. However, had it been added to 8 Deluxe, I probably would have liked it. From the looks of it, it looks like a half pipe heaven, and I'm a sucker for half pipes. But in all honesty, it just looks like an inferior Piranha Plant slide. It's a shame it's not in the game, but oh well. Lakeside Park is the perfect candidate for a modern remake. If you don't know, after the first lap, the volcano in the background starts erupting and shooting lava rocks onto the track. That might sound similar to Grumble Volcano, but the design of this track is so much different. Lakeside gives off a tropical Hawaii volcano vibe, more than the Bowser volcano vibe Grumble Volcano does. For a track this early in the series, to have interactive elements like this is so impressive, and it's a shame we didn't get it in the Booster Course Pass, especially with what they pulled off in Tour. The changes in elevation to Lakeside Park work perfectly to incorporate the volcano into the layout of the track. Now, if we can just get that Mario Kart 8-like graphic slapped on that, we'd be in for perhaps one of the most beautiful tracks in the series. Bowser's Castle for Mario Kart 64 has got to be the most famous of all the Bowser's Castles. This one is pretty unique, showing Bowser at least has a bit of class, as he has a nice courtyard as you enter. But then you enter the castle and it's guns a-blazing. Thwomps everywhere, fireballs firing, and then you rise the spiral tower to your escape. It has great creepy atmospheric music that sets the tone and an overall great Bowser mood. Delfino Square is so interesting because besides the Piantas, nothing about this screams Mario Sunshine or Isle Delfino. It doesn't even feel tropical while being near the water, but hey, that's alright. I still think it looks great. It almost gives an autumn vibe, which is such a cool twist to the concept. I love all the alternate paths on this track as it makes Delfino Square feel like a real navigable city. I also love the pier jump towards the end, even if it is a bit hard to pull off. Mario Kart DS's Rainbow Road honestly feels like the prototype for Mario Kart 8 Deluxe's anti-gravity gimmick. So many loop-de-loops and corkscrews throughout this track. This is one of the most point-and-simple Rainbow Roads in the series, but even when a Rainbow Road is simple, it's still a damn good track. I'm gonna be completely honest, I thought this track was in 8 Deluxe until just about now. And that's because 8 Deluxe literally plagiarized this track. The wavy split carpet was reused for Twisted Mansion, and the big mechanical Bowser was stolen from that game's Bowser's Castle. And I don't even blame them. This track rocks, literally and figuratively. This feels like the culmination of every Bowser's Castle that came before. It just feels like a more fleshed out and impressive version of each and every Bowser's Castle. Except you'd be forgetting about Bowser's Castle on the 3DS. This is by far the most unique Bowser's Castle in the entire series. It delves into the gimmicks of Mario Kart 7's water and glider mechanics, while also adding new elements to the track like the barrel and split path. However, I can't quite understand how lava flowing through water works exactly. Pretty sure that's supposed to make cobblestone, but I might be mistaken. If I said Luigi's Raceway was the Special K of Mario Kart tracks, Mario Raceway is the Frosted Flakes. Sure, is this one of the most bland looking tracks in the series? Yes, but God permitting you get yourself some mushrooms or stars, the amount of off-road shortcuts you can take is absolutely nutty. It literally feels like cheating when you get on a roll with this track. Such a great track. This has got to be one of my favorite themes for a track ever. Wario Shipyard was the perfect track to display Mario Kart 7's underwater driving mechanics. It's a great track with a few sick shortcuts, as well as some seriously underrated music. It was one I was honestly shocked not to see in the Booster Course Pass, as I think its remake and tour was seriously so well done. But hey, there's always the next game. Mushroom City is a brilliant track that takes the ideas of Toad's Turnpike and Yoshi Valley and combines them to make one of the most complex tracks of all time. Mushroom City is a busy course with many cars flying around that branches off to find the fastest route back to the finish line. As you do, you'll no doubt run into other racers along the way, taking different routes at the intersection, which is yet again something very ahead of its time. I'm absolutely shocked that this track never made a return. It's one of the most creative and fun tracks in the series, but I'm assuming it didn't make the cut for the Booster Course Pass for obvious reasons. I love Mushroom City and I would love to see it remade down the line. So here's the deal. DK Pass is absolutely an amazing track, but as you all know, two of the most highly praised tracks in the series already take up the ski mountain niche. But to that I say, this one was the original. Sure, I love the half pipes on DK Summit and the odyssey that is Mount Wario, but DK Pass was the first ski mountain track, and it's really solid. The slopes at the end give the same slalom-like vibe that you find out on the mountain, and the jolly music sets a nice tone for the chill track. In all honesty, DK Pass is the green bunny hill to DK Summit's blue square to Mount Wario's double black diamond. You've got to start somewhere, and this isn't a bad place to start. Daisy Hills was no doubt based on the Netherlands, windmills, mountains, and cute village towns. The track is an honest-to-goodness, nice and fun track. It's the second track in the game and isn't too challenging. However, challenge isn't everything. It set out with a goal in mind and accomplished that goal perfectly. It's got a nice flute soundtrack that fits so well and a really great layout. There's a really cool glider jump at the end that doesn't look like much now, but was perhaps the biggest jump in the series until this course. You can also ride on top of the roofs of the buildings, getting there by glider, which is really neat. However, I'm not sure how effective it is for gaining a competitive edge. Nonetheless, Daisy Hills is a really great track that I would not be upset about returning in the future. Dry Desert is the epitome of how to do a desert track right. Lots of obstacles outside filling the barren desert, with a temple at the center with falling sand and pokies in the way. It's a shame the tour remake wasn't brought to the Booster Course Pass like we all thought it would. Mario Kart Double Dash's Rainbow Road is by far the most underrated Rainbow Road in the series. First of all, we have to point out that this track is floating above Mushroom City. Also, this Rainbow Road is such a fun one. Lots of tight turns and boost panels throughout, adding to the challenge. I could go for less bumpers, but that's just the masochist. But the star of the show is obviously this air plume at the very end that takes you back to the beginning. Such a unique feature to this Rainbow Road that I really love. I think this one is a lock for the next Mario Kart, as it's one of the 3 Rainbow Roads to have never been brought back, and it's by far the best one. Maybe the coolest Mario circuit to date. First of all, wow, the cherry blossoms falling around the first quarter of this track are just stunning. I did not know the 3DS could handle this kind of animation, but they pulled it off. Secondly, I'm pretty sure this is the first track in the series that lets you drive through Peach's castle. Finally, it's just a really well-made track. Lots of mushroom cuts to take, plenty of sharp turns to build up mini turbos, and even a really cool glider shortcut. Really great track. Ugh, I love this track. Peach Beach nails the beachy track trope, with a great town area and an incredible fun beach section. The split path with the boost panels is heavenly, and the Cataquacks homing in on you and attacking you is such a great reference to Mario Sunshine. Also, is that Daisy Cruiser? This track has it all. There's also this fountain area towards the end that really doesn't need to be coded in, but is, which just shows the amount of effort put into this track. God, N64 tracks are just so long. But DK Jungle Parkway never really has a dull moment. Right from the beginning, it shoots you out over a huge jump into a weird immediate left turn. Then you trace through the jungle on a pretty narrow track, all while racing past jungle cruisers and waterfalls. Then through a cave that spits you right back out onto the track. This track embodies the chaotic nature of the Donkey Kong Country series, and I love it for that. Okay. 3DS Bowser's Castle might have been the most creative, and N64 Bowser's Castle might be the most influential, but Bowser's Castle for the DS is the best one, and the one I want to see remade the most. I think the layout on this one is not only the most fun, but also the most underrated. It starts out similar to the N64's with the Thwomp section, followed by this really cool metal carousel with 2 branching paths. Then follows the back half, which takes major inspiration from the original SNES tracks, with graded paths over lava with a bunch of jumps. Also, you can't forget the crazy synth music that plays behind you. This is just so good. I love the atmosphere of this track. Nighttime is such an underutilized tool to create such a special vibe in these courses. The Arabian Village theme of this track was such a great choice, as it creates one of the most unique settings in the series. There's also a lot of great path options and shortcuts that make this course engaging. Also, the pots holding the items is a great gimmick that adds a little item strategy beyond just attacking other players. Such a good track. Cheep Cheep Lagoon was the developers of Mario Kart 7's attempt at flexing their muscles, and they sure did. This track is gorgeous. From the vibrant sea life to the moody cave to the gorgeous lagoon and dock. This track is probably the best example of the underwater mechanics in this game, as well as having a pretty cool optional glider ramp in the cave. Next up is another fan favorite, and that is Airship Fortress. Mario Kart doesn't have a lot of villainous tracks that don't have to do with Bowser, but they got this one right. It takes me right back to playing Mario 3 and navigating those pesky Monty moles on the airships. I will say, the layout isn't the most exciting thing in the world. However, the theme of this track is so cool that I can look over it. The music is tense, and the short track length makes it even tenser. Overall, a really sick course. A track based on Woohoo Island is so sick. I can't even believe it exists. Exploring Makawoohoo up close and personal like this is a beauty to behold, and the final lead back down to the swordplay arena is just such a perfect way to end the race. Not to mention the sunset. Also, this is one of the first single lap tracks in the series. Not only is it fun and beautiful, but also so innovative. However, there was another track that was on Woohoo Island, and I did go back and forth between these two. While the journey on Makawoohoo is probably better, as an actual course, Woohoo Loop is hands down the better track. There are so many neat shortcuts here, and around every corner there's a new way to gain an edge on the competition. Not to mention, we're on Woohoo Island. Sorry, I'll stop, but this track is just so cool. For a long time, this track held the record as the longest track in the series. It's so long, in fact, that you only do 2 laps. That's right, it's Wario Coliseum. This track is an absolute cluster. The map of this track looks like the wire monster under my desk. You get dropped in what looks like a WWE Rage Cage arena, and then thrown into all kinds of twists, turns, corkscrews, waves, and nonsense that lie ahead. People always say they like Waluigi Pinball, but that track pales in comparison to what the chaos is in Wario Coliseum. I understand why it hasn't been brought back in the past because of just how long it is, but I'm pretty sure we're far past those limitations today, so we've got to see this in the next Mario Kart game. Have you or a loved one ever fallen victim to fake item boxes? Well, you could be entitled to compensation via Toad's Factory. Man, talk meta. Toad's Factory is by far one of the coolest tracks in the series. From the item box machines to the conveyor belts to the eerie red alarm section. Toad's Factory is everything you want out of a theme track and more. Earlier, I was ranking a Mario circuit, and I was like, wow, I can't believe I ranked this so low. And then I actually played Toad's Factory and was like, oh yeah, this is what a cool Mario Kart track is. Don't settle for boring tracks in your Mario Kart game. aim for this. This is Mario Kart at its finest. However, I still have one track left. What track could be better than a track that goes full meta and explores the deep lore of Mario Kart and delves into the intricacies of what it truly means to be a Toad in this day and age? Seriously? Dino Dino Jungle? That's the best track left off Mario Kart 8 Deluxe? Yeah, it's unlike any other track. It's got a big dinosaur at the center of it. What more could you want? This track is severely underrated. It's one of the most vibrant and fun tracks in the series. Has incredible shortcuts and alternate paths to engage the player with new experiences each and every time they play. And oh yeah, there's a giant dinosaur. On the GameCube, he's even guarding some item boxes. But then he's also an obstacle on the bridge. The dino is the key to all of this. The track is fun, goofy, and Mario Kart at the highest degree. What more could you want?
I want Airship Fortress at number 1.
Okay, that was rhetorical. Thanks everybody for watching. If you enjoyed this, I guarantee you'll like this video ranking every track in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Anyways, see you next time. Bye.